Thank you everyone for joining us today. We're going to be discussing operational transfer pricing and how Edwards Lifesciences is transforming their operational transfer pricing process.
My name is Jamie Egan. I'm the Vice President of Product Management for Longview. I've been with Longview for 15 years, primarily in the tax and tax technology space, starting with implementations around our provision tool, moving into the business development, and now I'm responsible globally for a product suite related to tax and transfer pricing. Joining me is Arthur Bickler. Arthur, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi, this is Arthur. I am a manager of tax technology at Edwards Lifesciences. I've been doing public accounting for about 5 years or so, about 10 years ago, and worked for a large insurance company before that, and then have worked at Edwards for the last 2 years.
So at a high level, our agenda for today, we're going to do a quick overview of Edwards Lifesciences, followed by an overview of Longview. We'll move then into what is driving the investment in transfer pricing software, both what we're hearing in the market and specifically as it relates to Edwards Lifesciences. What are some of the challenges to adopting technology, especially really focused on Edwards specifically in that particular area? Although I think everyone will recognize some similar challenges. And then we're going to move directly into Edwards implementation, specifically talking about their current phase of implementation, their long-term vision, and then we'll wrap it up with touching on some resources that the attendees can go back to and learn more. So Arthur, why don't you give some background to the attendees around Edwards Lifesciences?
Yeah, Edwards Lifesciences is a global leader in structured heart disease and critical care monitoring. Headquartered in Irvine, California, but of course right now we're all working from home. But we manufacture stuff. We manufacture quite a bit in the U.S., but all over the world. 4 or 5 plants that we have located around the world, and we have a big emphasis on R&D. We put a lot of money into creating better products for patients. Patients is definitely our biggest focus. Trying to make people's lives better and healthier through heart valves that can be inserted directly through intravenously. That's one of our core products, the transcatheter aortic valve replacement, which reduces the time for recovery on a heart surgery. And then the next one that we're working on is a transcatheter mitral and tricuspid therapies, which is what we're focusing on for the future. So always looking for new ways to provide health for your heart and heart disease.
Maybe you can touch on your role specifically and what you were brought to Edwards to do.
Yeah, so my role is really focused around technology. In my previous roles, I've kind of played more of a tax role, but always had technology as part of my job. But this is really more of a focus solely on technology. And looking at that kind of from 4 different perspectives. This is the way I kind of think of technology and data. There's kind of the people and how the people view it internally. So that's their roles, their responsibilities, training, how they use the data, how to use it more efficiently. And then how that works for a group, you have to think about governance and how to create structures and processes that help improve the process overall. So then in terms of the technology side, it's looking at the actual technology, so the different systems that we're using, and trying to figure out the best way to optimize those systems through data and data systems. And so a lot of what I do is just trying to figure out first kind of what are our key pain points and where are we spending a lot of time on processes, and we're doing a lot of manual effort, and then figuring out ways to automate those or streamline those or make those more efficient, and then kind of create a list of all those and then prioritize like what's going to get you the biggest bang for the buck now. So once we kind of identify those, it's a matter of figuring out how to present that to other stakeholders and the tax department itself to figure out what's the best next step and how can we incorporate these changes and move forward. And then designing the system, developing the system, and implementing it so that we can become more efficient with our processes and also get more data quicker and be able to do analytics and more of the analysis side instead of the, what I call the data wrangling. So that's my main role here at Edwards.
Great, thanks. For those of you not familiar with our company's history, Longview's been a global leader in the EPM space for 25 years, and we've offered a powerful platform for the Office of Finance. We take great pride in our focus on customer success and delivering value as evidenced by our customer retention rate. Everything we do has the customer at the center of our decision-making, from how we develop, deliver, and support the product to how we interact with customers and partners to help ensure their success as well. That DNA has developed over 25 years of domain expertise, intellectual property, and delivery, and it impacts all parts of our organization, always driving innovation in our product offerings. As we evolved out of the EPM space, we initially moved into Longview Tax and now into transfer pricing, which we're going to devote the bulk of our time to today. But everything that you see in blue on the right are products offered from Longview. Our initial anchor product was our tax provision solution. That was productized in 2012. Next was the ability to leverage those calculations against forecasted data to produce current and deferred long-range plans with a forecasted ETR. Country by country reporting was part of the OECD BEPS initiative, and that was followed by our transfer pricing solution in 2018, of which, as I said, we'll spend the majority of the time on today. When you see the Tax Data Hub, that's really the extensible platform that all of our solutions are built on. So they all leverage the same components to provide a quicker adoption rate from our user community. You don't have to learn new tools for creating reports or adding users. Essentially, the steps required just to maintain your system and grow as your organization grows. The analytics layer, that is kind of overlays all of our solutions and allows for real-time connectivity and real-time visibility from a visual intelligence perspective. And the Task Tracker is really kind of a calendaring tool that can be used to track and report and notify users of finance, tax-related tasks like payments, filings, due dates, things of that nature. We don't really have products in what you see as those gray bubbles, but we include them because the extensibility of our platform does allow us to incorporate that data into a single data hub for reporting purposes. So if you want to bring tax sensitized or finance sensitized data and be able to report on it within sort of one enterprise database, we have the capability to take feeds from other source systems, define the metadata definitions of that, and incorporate it into our solution. So the icons that you see down the left is really sort of the benefits to our customers and our users, with the key being we really want to elevate tax and transfer pricing within a finance organization, and the solutions leveraged by those departments as strategic assets, being able to do more reporting as opposed to value add reporting, as opposed to just constantly just being focused on the execution of a particular task. In February 2020, as those of you may know, Insight Software acquired Longview Solutions to add to their product portfolio that you see displayed on the left, and the market area addressed by those solutions in gray on the wheel. With the acquisition of Longview, Insight Software expanded the breadth of their solutions offerings. You see that moving across in blue on the wheel. And as part of that, we'll have access to their expanded partner network, and both organizations gain the potential customer synergies and product synergies that we'll be investigating over the coming months as we integrate our organizations. So let's move specifically into operational transfer pricing, where we'll spend the rest of our time today. So, what's driving the investment in transfer pricing? And our conversations with clients and partners circle back really to jurisdictions and revenue authorities becoming hypersensitive to profit shifting as it relates to other, lower tax rate territories or jurisdictions. And at the same time, their appetite to and expertise to drill into the details of your transfer pricing processes, technology, and policies is growing. So it's really leading to an increase in public interest and reputational risk for an organization. And that results in the TP models needing to be really more timely and accurate. Obviously we know transfer pricing is data heavy, with information coming from multiple sources, both in the form of actual and forecast data, if you're actually able to do it correctly and monitor as your year progresses. But it's not just that, it's split into multiple segments. So is it split by legal entity and getting that legal entity level of detail, further broken down by cost or profit centers or potentially trading partners, and then really getting down to product groupings or even the SKU level of detail. And sometimes you even have to layer in transactional level of detail. And trying to do all of that in Excel is really a challenge. And Excel really isn't able to effectively handle the volume, and certainly doesn't incorporate some of the controls that you're going to want with these calculations, especially when it comes time for scrutiny or audit. So enterprise technology is definitely going to be essential to harness the data, being able to provide better and more frequent visibility to the group's position, and ideally reduce large year-end true-ups. Those are the things that are going to raise questions, raise flags, and both internally and externally. And lastly, what we've heard is, sort of the discrete knowledge silos and input provided from people from a range of the departments in an organization. And sometimes, these people are not really sure what the downstream use of their data is. They're completing manual tasks, and the success of this process really relies on either legacy solutions or inherited processes that was developed by a colleague and who has since left. And that just also increases the risk to an organization if somebody leaves, and potentially bringing with them that deep subject matter expertise around their process and calculations. So, that's what we're hearing in the market is driving the investment. Arthur, are there particular areas that were, primary catalysts from an Edwards perspective? Maybe anything that we didn't touch on?
Well, yeah, those covered a lot of the ones that we were using that was driving our investment. I think the biggest one for us was the reporting. So just trying to get an idea of where we're at in the middle of the year, were our transfer prices working as we planned, or were they off? We didn't have a good way of seeing that quickly and efficiently. And so what we found we were doing is kind of going through the year, we'd see changes, but we weren't sure exactly what was causing it, and we weren't sure we wanted to make any adjustments because the data might change, or we didn't quite have the right data. And so then we go to the year and then find, closer to the end of the year, like, oh, okay, so those adjustments we should have made or we need to make now. And so we ended up making some larger adjustments at the end of the year. And so what we're looking for now is to be able to kind of see that data quickly and efficiently all throughout the year so that we can make kind of small decisions and small adjustments kind of as we go. And then hopefully by understanding those small adjustments, we can get a better model going forward. So just kind of hopefully we'll get an iterative process where we really kind of fine tune our model, which we don't have a good way of doing right now because just to do the reporting, it takes a few days and a lot of data in Excel to get that put together. And then there's always scrutiny, and somebody might have forgotten a piece of the data or something changed, or it's just hard to get that in real time using Excel. And so that's kind of the big driving force behind this investment. One of the other areas that we struggle with is just getting a handle on the data. So we have data sources from our ERP, from our planning system, from other systems for plant sourcing and things of that nature, and pulling that all together through Excel has become very cumbersome. And so that's also where we're trying to use a tool to pull that together and get that data kind of more more systematic and more easily accessible.
Great. So you kind of touched on a lot of topics and sort of endings on the technology side of things. That naturally leads into the challenges associated with adopting technology. And we found in our discussions with customers that having a mature or well-defined process is critical. Can you share the state of Edwards' process at the start? And did you need to do some process re-engineering first?
Yeah, we've gone through a bit of that, mainly because we haven't been able to do this kind of real-time reporting and analysis. So that's kind of opened up some new possibilities for us and a new way of processing the data and looking at the data, analyzing the data, all that. So it's definitely improved or modified the way we kind of work with the data now. We've used a couple of tools to help price out the product. So we set the prices once a year. We've used tools like Alteryx to kind of automate that. And by going through that process, we've kind of created a map of that process because it's a great visual tool for seeing how the data comes in, all the changes you make to the data, and then all the output. So you can kind of see that in one visual. That's helped quite a bit in documenting. And, because one of the struggles I'm sure we all face is, these processes are constantly evolving, and it's hard to keep the documentation up to date and, to factor in new systems and new data and new regulations and make sure that all is being updated in your process and functioning. So, working through a new system like this is a good time to reevaluate our current process and find ways to make those more efficient, to make them clearer, to make them so that all the users understand what we're doing and why we're doing it. Because oftentimes why is kind of the most important part, but kind of gets overlooked in the day-to-day operations. So yeah, that's how we've been focusing on process.
Okay. So what do you feel are some of the other challenges that you've encountered and are being bridged during this process with Edwards and adopting technology and to help your transfer pricing process?
Yeah, so it's it's always challenging to start a new system, try to figure out how that's going to best work for your team, especially given Excel is just so easy to jump into, and it's what we're all comfortable with. And working with the team to make sure they understand what the system's capable, what data we're getting, what we're doing to that data when we get it, and then what kind of outputs we have available, and then making sure that we work with them to make that they're getting the data that they need and the reports they need. So it's kind of working hand in hand to make sure that the system we're building is going to be something they use and they're going to be able to use it efficiently and quickly. So that's a challenge, because changing behavior is always, it takes time and patience, and to get that right, you need to really go through your process and really understand what people are doing with that and their behaviors. So I think that's been a challenge that we've kind of kept our eye on throughout the process. Yeah, and so data seems like it's always a challenge, especially for tax, as it's hard to get the right data for tax. Finance, when working with finance, we kind of put out our requirements and say, this is the things they need. And like, okay, yeah, no, that's great. We understand. We agree that you need that, but can you wait till the next implementation? And it seems like you're always kind of on the next implementation. And a lot of that makes sense, because what we're looking for is very specific. It generally requires tweaks to the system that are hard for the finance people to fully understand and fully vet out how that impacts the system in total. So data is always a challenge for us in terms of getting the right data at the right time. And so that's one area where we were focusing on really looking at the source data. So looking at our ERP system, getting that data right out of the system, and then our planning data, that making sure we get that data in the right format and the right detail, that then we can do our calculations for transfer pricing. And then one of the biggest challenges with data we have is that we look to have plant source data, and so that requires a whole other kind of process that then we have to layer in to this source data. So that's the challenges we face with data, which is a big one. So on automation, we're always looking for ways to automate. I mean, like I mentioned earlier, we've been using Alteryx actually quite a bit to help automate our workflows and get a better understanding of the current process and ways to automate more and optimize those processes. And so a lot of times what we found is, building those Alteryx models, then we can take those and then kind of systematize those in, bigger systems like Longview and Oracle and things like that. And so it's helpful to have that kind of initial step where we've done a lot of trial and error through a tool that's pretty easy to use, and then we get it kind of refined and then start building our process. And so we're always kind of looking for ways to automate and to improve the efficiency of our process. So then the other challenge that we face is, starting these projects, we want everything now, of course. It's kind of part of our society, I think, these days. And so it's easy to kind of try to get everything in the first project. And we've really been careful to break it up into smaller chunks that we can get core functionality in and build, and then use that data and that process and then really understand how it works before we kind of expand it further. So the idea really is to break that up so that we can take those small changes and implement them instead of having these big changes that tend to overwhelm people and systems and make it hard to have that change management really sink in.
Arthur, you're in the midst of your first phase, and you said right-sizing. You just got done talking about right-sizing a project as one of those challenges to adopting technology. And I know that transfer pricing is part of a two-pronged approach. You're also implementing the tax provision solution in this first phase as well. When you're right-sizing, and we were talking about this, you spoke about key areas of a project or project discipline, and you mentioned sort of the critical areas of focus, sort of at a high level, revolved around sort of these 5 main areas. Can you touch on each of the ways that Edwards attempted to maintain focus on each of those 5 areas in the current phase?
Yeah, so starting with the data integrity, like I said earlier, this has been always a challenge for us, and so we've really gone back to the drawing board and looked at what those systems have and what information is available and how we can get that out kind of as efficiently as possible, and then realized that like I said, they're not going to have the data in exactly the way we need it. So then we need to find ways to be able to, quote unquote, cleanse that data so that we have it in the format and the way that we need it, while still maintaining, the integrity in terms of reconciling to the financial statements and to what finance is looking at, because we want to make sure that we're looking at the same data. We may be looking at it from a slightly different lens because we need to have various source data for plant activity, or we need planning data in a certain way, but it's ultimately the same data. So it's a matter of just focusing on those systems and those exports to make sure that we've got the data the way we need it for tax, while still maintaining that connection with finance. So, and then one of the other areas that we've been focusing on is just the scope in general. And so, it's always a challenge to not bite off more than you can chew. And so, the way that we've, the steps we've taken to kind of minimize this risk is starting off with just a formal design document and listing out our requirements, so that we're really clear as to what we want during this first round, and knowing that we'll likely have more phases, and that's okay. This isn't going to be the one time we fix it and it's done kind of thing. I don't know if that exists, but breaking it up into the core stuff, the stuff that we struggle with the most right now. So for us, like I said earlier, just getting that reporting available quicker and kind of more broken out in the way we need it. That was one of our key requirements. So really focusing on that. And then, as you're going through, other stuff comes up and you think, oh yeah, that'd be great to have, but we've tried to keep that in check and not add everything at once, so that we really can focus on the key components, so that we're through at this first phase. We really have something that we can look at and use and go, okay, yeah, this is working great. Now let's build on that. Because a lot of that is a matter of, it's iterative. So you keep building as you go. So you got to make sure those first steps are working well and that it's doing what you planned before you kind of jump into additional phases. So then, other challenges that we face are obviously, I think everybody faces. Resource planning is always tricky. That was one of the reasons why they hired me, so that I could focus on, these kind of implementations, these kind of systems, working with data and documentation and issues and that kind of stuff, because it's really hard to do these kind of things and your full-time job. There's so much coming at tax these days that it's hard to do it all and still build a new system to handle all these changes. So one of the things Edwards was kind of smart to do was to hire somebody that could just focus on these technology type initiatives and projects, and realizing that it's kind of an ongoing thing. So so that's a lot of my focus is on, dealing with the issues that come up, not only within tax, but the issues that come up with working with IT and, whatever data feed we're getting or systems that we're using. Does it make sure it works with other systems? Working with finance to make sure that what we're doing gels with what they're doing. Obviously, finance has got their own initiatives with technology and resources and systems, and so making sure we line up with all that. So that's always something that we kind of keep in mind while we're working through the project, and that leads pretty well to some of the communication items that that we're dealing with. So since we deal with everybody in tax, it's like tax touches everything, so we need to make sure everybody is in the know on what's happening and the changes we're making, and then also we need to make sure that we understand everything finance and IT are doing to make sure that we're still in sync with the overall system. And so regular communication to not only our team leaders in tax but also to the IT team, the finance team, and we even have a business optimization leader that has been very critical in helping us kind of pull all these resources together and help us line up these various resources and documents and issues and everything, pulling it together so that we can work together between all these different areas. So then the final area of focus is measuring success. So this is always a challenge because few of us have time to measure what we're doing now, and then there's also this kind of hesitation to measure what we're doing now because it might not look good, and you certainly don't want to present that. And so finding realistic measurements is always a challenge, and then even when you do find those challenges, it's trying to find those proper measurements. It's trying to figure out efficient ways to measure them and capture that data so that it's not creating another full-time job. So so we're always looking for ways to improve that, and then the other thing that I think we're trying to keep in mind is again, this is kind of the first phase. Like we're planning to build more. It's not like once we do this, we're done. So in some ways, it's good to present some measurements that are not perfect, that you didn't get just right, because then that helps to line up your next project. Because once people see that, oh yeah, there's a gap here, they generally want to fill those gaps. And so you're helping kind of define the next project by getting the right measurements that show your current phase. We improved measurements for these items, and then these other additional measurements we're still working on to improve, and those can be improved through our next phase. So it's kind of keeping both of those in mind and making sure that you're getting that out to the various teams.
That's great feedback. Kind of specifically as it relates to features that Edwards Lifesciences has identified for the current phase with regards to operational transfer pricing. Maybe you can touch on each of those key features that you've incorporated into the first phase, and a brief reason as to why they were identified. Yeah.
So that first one I mentioned, and it's honestly the one that we're most excited about, is getting a fully burdened P&L statement that we have broken by legal entity, which is always a challenge for tax because finance thinks in terms of management entity, management reporting, and we need obviously by legal entity. So that's the first one that we're excited about. And then breaking that further down by line of business, because each of those businesses operate a little bit differently. And we've never even gotten to that level because we really just looked at the legal entity, because it usually takes us that long to get the data at that level. But now we can kind of go further down the line of business, and now our transfer pricing can be a little more subtle in terms of pricing by line of business. So that can get that we're hoping that'll give us a much more accurate result going forward. And then the one that we have probably the biggest challenge with is plant source. So kind of figuring out where these sales come from originally and being able to source back to that is one of the key components to our transfer pricing theory or practice. And so getting that data as accurate as possible it just helps with getting the right adjustments and to be able to support those during audits and questioning. So one of the other areas we're excited about is allocation. So again, these were all done in an Excel file, and generally we would just pick the top handful of entities that had the biggest risk, and we would do those allocations for those entities, and then the rest we'd do some high-level adjustments to kind of get us to the right place. But we're excited about the fact that now we'll be able to do these allocations for not only the big entities, but for all the entities, and then it's consistently applied to all those entities, and it's done automatically. So we're excited about having that availability, and then really start going into those allocations and going, oh yeah, no, we should adjust, our revenue by this, this allocation instead of this allocation. So being able to really see that data and how those allocations impact the data is going to be really helpful for our reporting. So the other area that we're excited about is combining actuals and forecasts. So, and being able to combine that at a more granular level so that we have, the revenue accounts, both in actual and forecast kind of right next to each other. So we can see how they're moving throughout the year and get an idea if we should be making adjustments, because we can see that, oh, throughout the year, the revenue numbers are kind of following forecasts, or no, the forecast is too high and we should kind of back it down, or start talking to FP&A and seeing if they really expect some of these revenue numbers to hit. And then the same with costs. Like maybe the revenues are kind of lining up just right, but the cost numbers aren't quite lining up properly. So we can start digging in to some of that detail and really start asking questions to see if these numbers are kind of what everybody's expecting, and then make a decision on making some of these adjustments. So that's an area that we've always struggled with, because we've gotten forecasts on, very high level by, regions and instead of legal entity. And then even within the regions, it's just like key line items of the P&L. We're now hoping to get that by legal entity and by specific lines on the P&L, so that we can really tie the actuals and forecasts together and see how those are moving and see if they're lining up as expected, and if we need to make any adjustments from the tax perspective. So that'll be very helpful for us going forward. And then, like I mentioned earlier, having these calculations kind of defined and built out, so we know that they're consistently being applied, and then that they tie to our transfer pricing documentation and our strategy. It's just a nice way to have that all connected and be confident that we have that all set up properly. And I mentioned this earlier, looking at the not only the P&L data, but also both the P&L from actual perspective and a forecast perspective, looking at that at granular level detail to see what's happening. So we can kind of see from a high level, oh, we see there's an issue here, but then to be able to dig in and figure out exactly what it is, and have those discussions with the teams, with the right teams, and have them kind of sooner so that we can make adjustments quicker. And so then all that is going to lead to adjustment journal entries that then we can make kind of throughout the year, instead of making these larger adjustments at the end of the year. So then we get much more subtler adjustments or smaller adjustments kind of throughout the year that kind of gets everybody on the same page and realizing kind of where we're going, instead of these like big adjustments in the end of the year that kind of throw up questions and concerns about what's happening. So those are the key features that we're working on in this phase.
So if we move beyond, that current phase, we've touched a couple of times really earlier in the presentation where you're not losing sight of that long-term goal. And one of the things that you brought up in that project discipline was, measurements of success and being able to communicate them effectively, but also honestly, and identify where those weaknesses that still need to be addressed. I'm assuming that kind of really forms a little bit of the starting point for the long-term goals. Is what you've learned in the current phase becomes the starting point for the next phase. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah. So we're always trying to find the measurements that are going to match up with the ultimate goals that we're trying to achieve, both from a reporting perspective, but also, just from an idea of how the company is operating and the performance of the company from a tax transfer pricing perspective. So keeping those key metrics in mind is helpful for not only understanding if this current phase is kind of improving our metrics, but then also, as you said, kind of lining up the next project and kind of the next focus of the next phase. So if we see, certain metrics that are off or don't, are not lining up to our expectations, we can then focus on those and then set up a new phase around that. So yeah, that's exactly what we're trying to do.
With as you do that, you're on the long term, you usually are integrating with other departments, and you get into varying cultures by department. So maybe like an R&D versus finance versus tax versus IT, and trying to align technically is a key part of that long-term goal. What are some ways that Edwards tries to get that alignment so that they're, those departments that might have different cultures and different priorities are kind of working together?
Yeah, Edwards has really put a lot of attention on data in general, which is great because I think that's something that a lot of companies struggle with. And we've created a kind of cross-functional finance data governance team that, it's kind of from accounting, from FP&A, from the various lines of business, from tax, all this get together and look at kind of the data that we have, the issues that we're hearing from end users, and then kind of mapping that out on a big scale and going, okay, so we have these like 5 items that we really want to focus on. We really want to get these figured out. And being able to make sure that when we do have a solution, that it's going to work for all the teams. So, because, with any of these projects, there's always a team that's leading it. But then we need to make sure everybody else that's going to be impacted by that is going to get what they need, or at least it won't take away from something they already have. Sometimes you always have to be careful about optimizing certain processes because maybe some of those processes were there because somebody else needs that data down the road. And so optimizing it by taking it out or streamlining it could impact kind of data further down the process. And that's not always easy to see. And that's where it's helpful to have these cross-functional meetings where we're all kind of looking at the data together and trying to figure out the best way to tackle some of these real core issues and core concerns that we have as a company.
Are there other areas of focus that are constantly in that mindset of helping you define those long-term goals?
Yeah. So as I mentioned earlier, we're really hoping to get more more useful information quicker, mainly because we have to, because more and more requirements are coming out. We're getting more and more regulations and requests from, internally from finance and other areas as to kind of what's happening with our transfer pricing adjustments and what's happening with, the current process that we're doing. And so getting the reporting done quicker is really essential. And it's not going to be done by hiring more people. The way to do it is to use technology and the tools that we have to automate these processes and pull this data together in a kind of systematic way so that we can see those reports quickly without a lot of user interface where they're making these little small tweaks to get adjustments in and those kind of things. So just get the data in and the reporting, and then let's look at that. And then if we need to layer in some adjustments, we can layer in adjustments, but try to get some kind of base level data as quickly as possible that is useful for making decisions. And so that's something we're always thinking about, not only for transfer pricing, but for tax provision and even for some of our compliance items, to make sure that we have this data set up properly, kind of to start with, and then be able to build the reports and analysis that we need. So then the next area of focus, as I mentioned, conditions are always changing. I mean, that was a perfect example of conditions changing. I mean, nobody expected we'd be here, 2 months ago. And so here we are all working from home, trying to make sense of what's going on. So we're obviously in a new world of fast-paced change. And so being able to handle that and deal with that quickly and efficiently is absolutely essential. And I think now with the tools we have, we can really start looking at this data beyond spreadsheets. So we can look at it in a more visual way using tools that are built into Longview, but also Tableau and things like that, and really take that data and give it a story that you can then present that information in a way that anybody in finance can understand. They don't need to have a tax background or understand what transfer pricing is. They can see kind of visually kind of what's happening and where the issues are, and then get an idea of what's going on. And that just helps them understand what's happening, and also helps us kind of present that and then get the information that we need from them kind of going forward. So having those tools to visually represent what's happening just helps us with a better understanding, but it also helps us present that to various constituents in our both internally and externally.
Specifically, Arthur, as it relates to your operational transfer pricing solution, have you already identified some key areas or queued up some key areas of or key features that you want to incorporate into the next phase?
Yeah, I mean, one of them is making sure that we're looking at the same data throughout the process. So what we struggle with now is we have all these Excel spreadsheets that we use to do various calculations, and they all have slightly different approaches based on the problem that it's dealing with, which is useful for those specific problems. But then what we find is that they're not always consistent, and so we sometimes run into issues with that. And so by having a more unified process, we're hoping to be able to see that data, the same data, from when we set the prices to when we're monitoring the prices to then when we're documenting the transfer pricing at the end, that we're throughout that whole process, we're all looking at the same data, and that we're not looking at 10 different spreadsheets that kind of get us to the same answer. So that's definitely something that's on our long-term vision. And as we're designing the system, we're keeping that in mind, not only for transfer pricing, but even for provision, to make sure that that data that we're looking at for provision is the same data that we're looking at for transfer pricing, so that we don't have some kind of mismatch there, so that we're looking at the same data but from different lenses, and maybe giving different answers, obviously, but we're at least looking at the same core data, and that just helps with the consistency and reporting, and then presenting that to various users. So one of the other areas that I mentioned already is just monitoring. Being able to get the reports on a more regular basis. And right now we're just shooting for quarterly so that we can make adjustments quarterly. And right now that may just be making a journal entry quarterly, but that could be down the road actually changing prices going forward. But then figuring out that process around setting the price and then the impact on our inventory, our PII, making sure that process is efficient so that we're not, by changing the price, we're adding a whole bunch more work to another department. So again, going back to that, working synergistically with teams so that, like, if we decide to go down this road of making, mid-year price adjustments, we also have helped those teams that are going to adjust the inventory to do that as efficiently as possible, so that they're not, we just didn't, double their workload. So it's working with those kind of things to make sure that the changes we make, we can then automate the steps that come further down the road. So those are two big ones that I think we definitely are excited to get kind of set up for, and are definitely hoping to push towards as soon as we can. So, and then the other one again is analytics. I mean, this is a big one, I think, for a lot of companies now, and being able to quickly see where you're at in your current transfer pricing strategy, how well you're doing with your current transfer prices, and being able to kind of see that quickly, present that quickly, is definitely the direction we want to go. So setting up the data, setting up the tools, setting up the teams so they can use the data efficiently and present the analytics so that they can then tell those stories to within tax and within finance and even other areas of the company. So those are the big items that we're definitely keeping in mind as we build this current phase, that we want to make sure that we're set up to handle these bigger projects that we want to have incorporated as we go forward with technology initiatives.
Great. Well, thank you. Thanks again to Arthur for yours and Edwards Lifesciences participation and insight. I do want to thank everybody who joined the webinar today for your time this afternoon or morning based upon your location. I hope you found it informative and received value from Edwards Lifesciences experience. Hopefully you have a better feel for Longview's capabilities and how we could help your organization better manage your transfer pricing process. Wanted to call out a couple of resources that are available for you. If you'd like to learn more, you can obviously go to our website, www.longview.com, and navigate to the transfer pricing area, and potentially our other suite of products, provision, close, and plan. In the very near future, though, we are going to be scheduling a full operational transfer pricing demo, which will do a much deeper dive into the features and potential use cases. So please keep an eye out for that. We'll be communicating that to the attendees today. And finally, for all those that attended, what we will do is we'll follow up with a white paper and a PDF version of the deck. That'll be a takeaway that you can use as a refresher on the topics that we covered. That'll be part of that follow-up email, and you'll also be provided with a Longview point of contact should you need some additional information or wish to schedule a private demo. On behalf of Arthur and the entire Insight Software organization and myself, thanks again.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
At this time, we'd like to open it up for questions.